And each immersion basically begins kind of this with the same practices, the same rhythms. And the first spot that we want to start at is at this SWOT analysis. What this next process is going to give us space to do is before we start bringing input or any instruction, this is going to give us a chance as leaders, but also as a community to listen to one another. We want to try to get a good glimpse at what's actually going on in your context. What is it that's taking place there? I've already been, connecting with a few of you before dinner, and so you're going to get to hear some of the stories of breakthrough that a few of you are experiencing. This is going so well. You're going to get a chance for the rest of the community to hear that. Some of you, not only have breakthroughs, but you also have challenges that you're really facing. Some battles that have been really difficult. Maybe you're facing the wear and the tear from those battles, or maybe it's happening in your community and there's just kind of some hurt going through. We're going to get a chance to hear all of those different things. And like Fred had mentioned, kind of like leaving your ego at the door, instead of, as we work through this idea to get a glimpse of what's going on in your context, we're not going to try to put you on the spot where you need to outdo the rest of the people. We're not going to you get the first place ribbon for best report out and you get the last place. We just want to get a good glimpse at what's actually happening. Because what we want to do is when we look at what is, then we're going to try to articulate and weave in with our inputs things that are actually practically relevant to what you're doing, to talk about and to spur on faith. If this is what is, what could be? Because you guys know what it's like. When you take the raw material of you, your life, your current context, your church, your city, your mission, and you add the ingredient of the Creator God to it, He can take dead bones and bring them back to life. So we want to start with what is. We want to do everything we can together as a community to fuse in what could be, so that our hearts rise to that point where at the very end, where we have that strategic plan moment, you're going to report back to the rest of the group. Here's what I think God is calling me to do, because we're going to declare by faith, this is what will be. I'm believing God for these things. So we're going to start that way, and this SWOT analysis gives us a good way to start with a good glimpse at what is. This is Vice Admiral James Stockdale. A lot of this content comes from the book Good to Great that you may have read a decade or so ago. But in that book, Good to Great by Jim Collins, he talks about Jim Stockdale. He's in the U.S. Navy. He was in the Vietnam War. He was a Medal of Honor recipient. And he was also a prisoner of war during that time frame in the very infamous Hanoi Hilton. While he was there, Stockdale paid attention to the different prisoners of war that were coming through. A picture of him actually there at the Hanoi Hilton. And what he observed is that some people, like on the left, came in as optimists. They were captured in war. They arrived. They had already been through hell. And they just said, we're going to be out by Christmas. And when Christmas came and Christmas went, the optimists were really crushed. Other people came in, they had already been through the hell that they had been through, and they arrived like pessimists. We're never going to get out of here. And like a self-fulfilled prophecy, their body deteriorated, their mind deteriorated, and it became true. So James Stockdale, noticing that neither optimism or pessimism were the right way to go, it wasn't one or the other, what he discovered was this thing that is called the Stockdale paradox. This is again a quote from the book Good to Great. Stockdale says this: you must never confuse faith that you will prevail. Notice the optimism of that portion of the statement. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with a discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. That's the pessimism, whatever they might be. So he says that you can't go the optimist-only route, and you can't go the pessimist-only route. You've actually got to hold those two opposite ends in tension. And that paradox that happens when you hold those two things in tension gives you what you need to experience the breakthrough that you need to experience. So we want to put the Stockdale paradox into practice as we take a look at this SWOT analysis, and you get ready to kind of report out what's actually happening in your own context. Many of you may have done a SWOT analysis. It's oftentimes used in the business world. This is an adapted version, so if you come from any corporate experience, you may notice, well, you're using it a little bit differently. That's because we're using it a little bit more for a church context so that we as pastors can understand what's going on in our specific spaces. But here's the basics of it. You get these two opposite sides on the horizontal spot. The SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's what SWOT stands for. So on the horizontal bar, you've got weakness on the left-hand side, and you've got strength on the right-hand side. There are current strengths in your own church context, and there are weaknesses in your church context. And what we want to do is calibrate the Stockdale paradox. We want to hold on with faith that we will prevail. We will see the kingdom come. But we also want to confront the brutal facts. We don't want to gloss it over with Christian language and not actually state the truth of, like, this is just really hard and sin is running rampant through my church community right now. If that's the case, we want to just name it. Because as we confront those brutal facts, while we hold on unswervingly that Jesus will prevail in the end, that's the spot where breakthrough comes. So we want to evaluate strengths and weaknesses. On the other axis, you got opportunity at the top, because there are currently opportunities in front of your church community. But we'll just pick on Woodburn. The population there is 70% Hispanic. That's an opportunity. So therefore, let's leverage, strengthen the direction to establish ministry to people who either come from another culture or speak another language. And how can we recognize the current opportunities in front of us and pull together to see kingdom breakthrough there? But not only are there opportunities in front of us, there are also threats in front of us. Some of the things that Fred was talking about was naming some of the threats. There might be, one of the threats is like, I'm at a really low state, kind of in my mental health and even in my spiritual health, if I'm really honest. That just may be a current reality that you're currently facing. And we're not asking you to just drum up your good pastor face to come prove something to us here and fake your way through it. We're repent and believe people. And the beginning of that process of repenting and believing is just naming something what it is and then moving beyond it. So these are the four different categories and kind of how you can see Stockdale paradox fitting in. What we're going to do is we're going to use where these different axes meet together to be able to see four different quadrants. In your current reality, there are places where strength that you bring to the table or your community brings to the table and opportunity that is present have met together in the last 6 months to 12 months. And you have experienced breakthrough. That's a spot where anywhere that God's kingdom has broken through in your reality. I want you to start thinking, if you were to name what are the 3 breakthroughs that you and your community have experienced in the last 6 to 12 months? What would they be? Then you also have spaces where there are opportunities, but it met a weakness that you and your community brought to the table. And so those are frustrations. Like there's something that we could apprehend, but yet there's something inside of us that's preventing us from being able to see this thing. It's not in the breakthrough quadrant, it's actually a frustration. It's an experience of internal resistance. An opportunity's there, but there's no strength to engage it. The third quadrant, bottom right-hand side, this is where you've got a strength in you and your community, but there's an external threat that's preventing you. It's not in the breakthrough category because there's opposition. We don't live in neutral territory. Maybe it's spiritual in nature, or maybe it's even just some challenges that are there inside of your church community. So it's the experience of external resistance, engaging the area from a place of strength, but the presence of some kind of threat makes it feel difficult. And then the fourth quadrant is this. There are just places in the last 6 to 12 months where both an internal weakness in you and your community have met an external threat. And in that spot, it's okay for us just to name it a failure. This hasn't materialized the way that we would have hoped it did. So it's the experience of a threat with no strength to combat it. So what we want to do is use that framework as a way for you to reflect. In the last 6 to 12 months, what would be the top 3 breakthroughs that we've experienced as a church community? What are the top frustrations that we've experienced as a community? What are the top 3 battles that we've been experiencing in the last 6 to 12 months? And what are the failures that we have to tell about? Again, this isn't a grade. We're just trying to get a glimpse. We want to hold on unswervingly that Jesus, who's the same yesterday, today, and forever, will lead us in victory. But we want to confront the brutal facts of our current reality. And we're believing that when we do those 2 things and then share it in a loving community, we can rally together to actually see that happen. We don't have to do it as lone rangers.